Well, we are microdosing some tamales de gallina. Actually, Max,
Yeah.
I've got some right here.
Oh, wow. That's it?
This is what it looks like.
I see the tamale part. Wow.
So apparently, this is one of the things they eat in El Salvador on Christmas Eve.
So this is a banana leaf?
Maybe somebody in the comments can explain what it is.
Oh, okay. So it's a mystery. It's a banana leaf, and inside there is something. We're not sure yet, but something.
But we're going to have to figure out how to cook it. I've got to Google it.
Oh, okay.
When I went to pick it up yesterday, I thought it was going to be already prepared. But I guess I have to heat it up in some way. I'll figure out how to heat it up or if I have to cook it or like what. See, this is all new to us. This is an adventure.
Yeah.
Late in life to discover a whole new world, which is a renaissance. We're being reborn right now through this, tamales de gallina.
Yeah, that's true. That's fantastic. Well, I look forward to that. That's on Christmas Day.
No, it's Christmas Eve.
Ah, okay.
This is when people have their Christmas celebrations here, unlike in the United States where we do it on Christmas Day. Many countries, I'd say probably more countries in the world, it seems, do their celebrations on Christmas Eve, what we call Christmas Eve in America. But in the U.S., we don't have any sort of special meal or opening presents on Christmas Eve. We do it all on Christmas Day. So apparently from tomorrow, I've got 4 of these, right?
Right.
So I have, we have some for breakfast tomorrow and then for dinner.
It looks pretty substantial. And it weighs, a nice amount. This will be definitely a hearty Christmas meal.
Well, certainly if we don't like it for breakfast, then we can use the second set as a doorstop, for later in if we don't want our dinner to have that.
Okay.
Let me see.
That sounds
You
like a
talk
plan.
while I'm going to look over at our YouTube channel and find out what's going on. I see the live comments happening on there.
Yes.
But when I go here on my phone, then I can actually read your live comments happening.
Okay. Yeah, well, here we are. It's Christmas time in El Salvador. We are in San Salvador, the capital city, and it's sunny as heck. It's 85 degrees, 35% humidity. I'm looking at the snowpocalypse on the East Coast and then the heartland of the United States, and I laugh, ha, 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 because, of course, none of that is here. It's just hot and relatively dry, splendiferousness on the weather front.
Right. Well, so, of course, speaking on the weather front, we went from the tropical Caribbean island of the Bahamas all the way out to San Francisco, Silicon Valley. That would be, of course, Sam Bankman-Freed. He has had to leave his tropical paradise where he was in one of the 5 worst prisons in the world. So, he was at first fighting extradition, and then he spent 4 days in one of the 5 worst prisons in the world and decided, well, actually, I'd rather go back to the U.S. And, of course, he posted $250 million bail, and he's out. I saw some photos of him in the first class lounge, which I know very well, at JFK, the American Airlines First Class Lounge. He was there with his parents and some FBI agents escorting him back to San Francisco, where he's going to live in luxury until he ever goes to trial.
Right, well, it's a video game. So those days and nights in the prison in Bahamas was equivalent to when you open a bad door in a video game and you have a penalty, or Chutes and Ladders. It's a great game we used to play as kids. You have a ladder, you go up, and then you hit a chute and you fall down. So this is just part of the video game. He had a 4 or 5 night experience in the simulated prison environment. It was all put together for him as part of his game operators. There is no prison in the Bahamas. He never was involved in any scandals per se. He's just part of the simulation, and he had to go into that experience of the simulated prison. And now he's on an airplane flying around with guards. He's looking for his next power up pill to take to get to the next level of the video game. So he's definitely leading in this particular game called FTX Scamafraud. And he's definitely the most winningest player. His girlfriend, Caroline, is in New York. She's trying to play the game as well. Apparently, she's copped to charge and to save on some simulated jail time, but she's out drinking fancy coffee and Starbucks and whatnot. So this is really, the culmination of 30 years of gaming, I would say.
It's kind of like, for me, there's two things. Is the Bastiat quote that I often use, which is that when plunder becomes the way of life for a group of men in a society, over time, they create the legal system that justifies it and the moral system that glorifies it. Meet, who wants to be a quintillionaire? If I were going to call this game something, I would be Who Wants to Be a Quintillionaire? Because, of course, Sam Bankman-Freed was flown in a Gulfstream 550, G550, back from the Bahamas to New York, landed in White Plains. And so he was flown in luxury and from the Bahamas to New York. And one thing that I noticed is, of course, he went into Manhattan for one night in prison before he made bail or bond, whatever you want to call it. He was released the next day after paying, I don't know how much of the $250 million he had to put down, but maybe 5% or 10% his parents did, using their house as collateral. But nevertheless, the point is he only had to stay one night and then was released the next day. When if you look at Rikers, you have on Rikers a bunch of non-quintillionaires. And you'll find I think there have been actually 19 deaths so far in custody in Rikers just in 2022. And many of them were suicides from young men who have been there for sometimes up to 3 years. One of the men who committed suicide for things like stealing a backpack or something really small, something minor, relative to what Sam Bankman-Freed is alleged to have done. So if you're poor, you end up in Rikers and you're there for years without the ability to get out. I guess they must suffer from cash bail, where if your bail is $250 million, you have to come up with the entire amount. Where obviously Sam Bankman-Freed and his family did not have to come up with $250 million. So it's Who Wants to Be a Quintillionaire? If you're a quintillionaire, we see obviously you get treated very differently. And the plunder, the moral system and the legal system that justifies the big plunder is quite extraordinary for all to see. You could just see it right there.
Oh yeah, well, the type of bail, actually the classification of that bail, means that his parents had to put up exactly zero. They put up their $4 million house to secure this $250 million bail. They had to put up zero cash. So absolutely nothing was put up. Now, as far as the other players in Rikers, those are what we call, I forget the initial now, NPCs or non-playing characters?
NPC.
Yeah, non-playing characters. They're in the game, they're just the background noise to the game. They're not actually in the game. So they don't count at all. They're just they're written in, they're programmed into this game called Who Wants to Be a Quintillionaire, and they don't exist either. So also, what reminded me of this guy, Sam Bankman-Freed, he looks a lot like Dora the Explorer. You know that cartoon? It's Dora. She wears a pith helmet, and she goes around. It's a cartoon, and she's looking for wildlife in the jungles and whatnot. And they look kind of similar. So I guess it's Nora the Explorer meets the Matrix meets Who Wants to Be a Quintillionaire. And there's going to be a 3-picture deal. I'm sure he's going to do a deal with Hollywood. I'm sure that law that says if you're a convicted felon, you can't, or in the process of being a convicted felon, you can't do a Hollywood deal to capture or make money on your criminal activity. I'm sure that'll be waived. I'm sure he'll be starring in a 3-picture deal for Paramount Streaming, starring Sam Bankman-Freed, reenacting all the key moments in his journey, his incredible epic journey through the simulated jail in the Bahamas, through the Gulfstream jet, through Rikers Island. I mean, what a freaking story. What a great TV show this will be.
Well, I did see in the American Airlines lounge, he was sitting in one of those seats I always hate getting stuck in. So he didn't get the nice ones, the nice comfy chairs, right, with the nice view of the planes taking off. But also what I noticed is that he seemed to be having a good time sitting there on the internet. Lord knows what he was doing, probably trading. But yeah, we had been talking about that, like, while that period between the collapse, once the whole Ponzi scheme collapsed, and him being arrested. like it was quite extraordinary that the generational gap that you saw, that the Zoomers are just like very different, right? This is even beyond like, there's the boomers, there's Gen X, and then there's millennials, and there's something kind of like tying us all together. Boomers and, my early childhood was not too dissimilar to some of the things you saw in the boomer generation. We had some of the same cartoons. It was before the whole commercialization of childhood, for example. So we didn't have all these brands for children to wear these clothes, really expensive clothes. We didn't have all these, Cartoon Network and things like that. We had Pong. That was it in terms of Atari sort of games. And then now Zoomers, these Generation Z, and I guess he would be that, right? Like, because he's 30 or 29, 30. So he really seemed like, watching him and listening to him, like in a game, right? That he was in some sort of metaverse where there are no consequences. If you have like the cantillionaire sort of thing, like if you have enough points in your balance sheet, even if they're totally stolen and fraudulent and made up, like you're still winning the game and there are no consequences. Like you get to the top, you get the trophy in the game. So like it was just extraordinary to watch, because I mean, you could see the difference between him and Bernie Madoff, right? Bernie Madoff looked guilty. He was sheepish. He was like, looked embarrassed when he was, being filmed. He was like, I'm guilty. I did it. Like as soon as he was arrested. This guy was just like in a totally different world, but seemed like he looked kind of like a normal human being, but is in that generation of Zoomers who are in a metaverse where like you could just decide, like we've talked about, like you could just because I call myself a different gender, I am. Like, it doesn't matter my body parts. It's just like, I'm a different gender. You're like, okay. And a character could swap, your skin in a game, and it's just like a different character, right? Well, that's what it felt like that there was a suddenly huge gap between the generations, even between millennial and Zoomer now.
Right. That skin swapping is in the metaverse, where you want to be a penguin one day, and the next day you want to be a giraffe, or you want to be an explorer, you want to be a prisoner in a fake jail.
You want to be a prisoner, yeah.
Yeah, in Bahamas. That's another skin in the game, and you trade the phantom tokens and the game tokens, and it's a big part of the big game. And I thought was very interesting is that once the bail was announced, that FTT, which is the fake token of FTX, went up. It's a huge rally. So apparently the gamers who are in this game felt like this was a tremendously bullish signal.
Our character is winning.
Yeah, our character is winning in our game, and we have the fantasy metaverse life. I mean, clearly people who own the Tom Brady token in that metaverse are getting killed right now. But people who own the Sam Bankman-Freed token in the metaverse, where he just went through the Bahama fake jail, they're doing great. I mean, they went long FTT, the phantom token. Did he secure his bail with FTT tokens? I wouldn't be surprised to find out if Gary Gensler and all those guys accepted FTT tokens in lieu of actual whatever in this gaming metaverse, right? I mean, he's on his laptop. So he obviously no prisoner in that situation ordinarily who wasn't a Gen Z gamer would have access to a laptop, right? I mean, this is a guy who's stole $8 billion recently, but he's out there probably cooking up something called bail coin, which is going to be circulated soon on all the major fake exchanges. It'll have a market cap of 30, 40, 50 billion dollars, and he'll swap his $250 million bail for this new bail. It'll be maybe a $500 million bail, but it'll be backed on this new token, which is now traded on some other exchange. It won't be Bahamas, maybe in the Cayman Islands. And then he'll use that to finance his next adventure, which will be Alameda 2, a new hedge fund. And Caroline will be able to run it from her country club prison, wherever she's living. I mean, this is going to be a great move up for this chick to be in some country club prison. And so she'll be trading it over there in Alameda Part 2.
Yep. Well, he's back in the U.S. I think he definitely made the right decision, of course, obviously, because you don't want to be in prison, apparently, according to people we know, that you don't want to be in prison in the Bahamas. And he definitely might have been Jeffrey Epstein. there. So yeah, and next week I will announce, we'll be in a new studio where we have, those proper, sure, SM7B mics, and it's a more like Joe Rogan sort of setup. It's going to be a continuation of the Orange Pill podcast, and but in a full studio, and so we're gonna kind of take a hiatus, at least for now, from the Max and Stacy report, just because it's we're in a new era. Like I just feel like those days of news it's over, right? Especially if you're here in El Salvador, because this is a rebirth. This is just a time of discovery and new things and the beginning of good times. And there are no headlines to cover because it just is, right? There are no headlines creating a reality that isn't there. Like so many of the US news and mainstream media headlines are creating like totally metaverse realities, right? They create fictional realities of how good war is, how amazing Sam Bankman-Freed is, how he was a charitable guy that it went horribly wrong for. He was just trying to find a way to give some charity to people, help some, effective altruism. I saw somebody's Twitter bio. They were like a victim of effective altruism, which made me laugh. That of course we're all victims of effective altruism, right? So the metaverse headlines that we have covered for 20 years, and we were exposing them through first when we were covering financial crimes, and of course, yes, the banking system then collapsed, and then we talked about central banks and gold, and then we found Bitcoin. And then now we're in this age of Bukele, I call it, because there's that moment that President Bukele made or announced that he was going to make Bitcoin legal tender was the moment of hyperbitcoinization, right? So there's a pre-hyperbitcoinization and there's a post. So he pressed that button and that metaverse game is over and we're back to the real world, right? That fiat fraud era is over. The dark ages of that bad metaverse game. And you see all these, like, if you look at any of the metaverse games, by the way, they're shit, right? They're really bad graphics and horrible fake tokens and horrible reality. And they're all like saying, let's fucking go. This is great. And you're like, no, it's shit. An apocalypse all around you. And your tokens are fake and your world is fake. Well, here we are in hyper-Bitcoinization in El Salvador. And so we're back to Orange Pill Podcast. Like, we're back to a format where we could just say what we see. We discuss what we're witnessing, because history is being made, and history is beyond just headlines. Headlines are for ordinary times that are not amazing.
Yeah, exactly. Headlines are for ordinary times, and these are amazing times. And that's why we're doing Orange Pill Podcast, to reflect the amazingness of these times. Now, that's right. It's happening starting very soon. And I look forward to that. And it's going to be coming from a country that has obviously established itself as clinging to the values that were with us during a time of hard money. You see, the metaverse now is everything outside of El Salvador for the moment. Hopefully there'll be more countries joining up with El Salvador soon and being a part of the renaissance of hard money and values, human values. But right now, this is a unique place on planet Earth, and everything outside of here is becoming like the metaverse, where everything is seen as just part of role-playing a game and with its own gaming currency. And when we see all values are completely fungible, it used to be where the money was fungible and the values were steadfast. Now the values are fungible and the money isn't steadfast either. So you have it's all fungible. The legal system is fungible. The medical system is fungible. There's nothing with any steadfast values out in the metaverse because it's constantly being rewritten in real time by whoever has the proof of stake, the most proof of stake. So there are no values out there. And so we see the obvious transformation of the metaphysical's reality in the metaverse that is based on the id. It's based on lust, essentially, and fetishism. And we see the result. That's where we are in history.
Well, it's without ethics, right? Where now Bitcoin is ethical money. And people are actually attracted to good people are attracted to good ethics, and good ethics attracts good business, good merchants, good people, good builders, good creators.
Yeah, well, this has been the story, going back 2,000 years in the study of ethics. It's like, how do you determine what is ethical, what is moral, and how does that percolate through the society? And we have experimented with that for a long, long time. And then came along the metaverse, which said that nothing is ethical, nothing is moral, nothing is real, nothing has value. There are no ups and downs. There are no genders. There are no identities. We're all completely fluid about everything in all ways at all times. And so time doesn't exist either. And we're born into this perpetual childhood of. I saw Steven Spielberg said something interesting recently. He said, when he started out making films followed a classic formula of a beginning, a middle, and end. And he said, we're in an era now where the film has a beginning, and then has a second beginning, and then at the end is really a third beginning, right? So if you look at the structure of the story of these films these days, it's always about revealing, like, this is not actually the story is about to begin. Like, the monster is really behind that cloud over there. And then they find the monster and they're fighting the monster and say, wait, no, actually, the beginning is that behind that cloud and that monster is the real monster. So we're going to start again. It's the new beginning, right? So there's never any resolution to these stories. It's just you're constantly on the edge of the beginning, but there's no ending.
But that's exactly what I was just saying about Sam Bankman-Freed. The reason why the structure of a story going back to ancient Greece, as Aristotle explained in Poetics, what I was talking about is they live in a world without consequences, right? That you never have to pay for your choices.
No, just hit reset.
And that's a world without ethics, right? Because there are costs and consequences to the choices you make every single day. And we were just saying that, like, about Bitcoin, it's exhausting. Like, it does every 10 minutes, you have to prove your worth. You have to prove you're, a Bitcoiner, that you're worth Bitcoin, that you deserve Bitcoin. And that's exhausting. That's proof of work. But a lot of people have they give up after 10 years. You've seen some well-known Bitcoiners who were OGs and good Bitcoiners for a long time, and then they blow their whole reputation for one quick, cheap buck.
Yeah.
Usually because of their ego, they decide that because they were early, that they are the magnificent invention, the creation, the discovery that is Bitcoin, and they lose their minds, as Max often says.
This guy Jordan Belford, I think his name is. From The Wolf of Wall Street. He is a convicted criminal, and he became a celebrity. They made a movie about him, and he's never off TV.
Yeah.
So I think Sam Bankman-Freed will be on TV constantly. He'll be on CNBC every day. He'll probably have his own show pushing this idea of the metaverse, that he's actually a philanthropist, and he made a boo-boo, and he shouldn't go to jail. And this will go on for years. We're going to have to listen to this guy espouse his moral universe of never having any consequences and just hitting reset every time you feel like it for years and years, and no one's going to stop him, and they're going to use that to push through the CBDC. I think he'll be the poster child for the central bank digital currency. It probably has his face on it, and he'll be on every day talking about why it's great. And we're going to avoid all the mistakes I made with FTX. And that trial, as Kevin O'Leary says, you're innocent until proven guilty, right? So I mean, they've already established that they're going to give this guy a pass, and we're going to let him just talk anyway. And he's going to be the salesperson for CBDC. We'll never see this guy. Will be on TV every single day.
Yeah, well, they'll blame something. They'll blame climate change or COVID or something, gender identity. He'll say he wants to be a different. Well, it's just going to be something weird. But it definitely seems so breathtaking just to compare what happened to Boomer Madoff versus Zoomer SBF. Like it doesn't seem like just to watch those little clips or the photos of him at JFK in the American Airlines lounge. It doesn't seem real. You're like, what is going on? What's happening here?
Yeah, it is a remarkable contrast because they are doing similar, very similar crimes.
Yeah.
And the difference between a boomer like Bernie Madoff versus a Zoomer, Sam Bankman-Freed, is a very stark contrast. And it shows really, if you put those two stories together, you see very rapidly how the culture and the society has collapsed. So,
but that's what Steven Spielberg is also recognizing in storytelling. So the story is important to have a beginning, middle, and end. There have to be consequences. There has to be, man versus man, man versus nature, or man versus self.
But that's
there has
out
to
now,
be
right?
There is no struggle.
Right.
Therefore, there is no consequence.
Well, when we first met, I was talking to you about financial crimes, and you said this doesn't make sense because classic storytelling, there are consequences to the crimes.
That was how we first met.
Right, and I said, look, there are no consequences in the financial world because you can always just repackage your previous crimes as a new security and resell it and extend the maturity date and give it a different coupon rate, and there are no consequences. There is no end. And you would say, wow, that's incredible because it goes against all laws of storytelling. And then we would be looking at the Financial Times, and I'd be saying, like, here on the front page, here's a story about a packaged security. It's the repackaging of a failed security. The people who committed the crime are repackaging that security. They will continue to live a productive life with making tons of money on Wall Street, and there will be no consequences. And you were like, wow, that's fascinating. And that was the beginning of our content creation. Was all of our shows going back to The Truth About Markets on Resonance FM. We did that show for 12 or 13 years every week, talking about that. The truth about markets, the truth about what goes on in these markets. It goes with the Kaiser Report. It goes with Orange Pill Podcast. It'll continue with the Orange Pill Podcast. So it's the same thread about the transition from a world of classic storytelling and consequences and heroes and villains and character development and something that resembles a life that people are used to living, to this perpetual, never-ending reset, beginning, metaverse tale told by infants who are coddled and force-fed, vegetarian meat substitutes and drugs, vegan, who are become heroic in this new world. But, I think that El Salvador is the counter story. El Salvador is saying, you know what, we don't want that. We're going to go Bitcoin as legal tender, and nothing else is here because nothing else is any good. And so this is the counter story. This is like during the Middle Ages or the Dark Ages. A lot of the records from the classic period of Greeks and Roman, etc., were kind of held in custody in Ireland. Ireland became a treasure trove of a lot of these things, and they were held in storage for hundreds of years while the Dark Ages and the Middle Ages kind of went through their period.
It was the Renaissance. The Renaissance was begun when the classical texts were found in the monasteries.
Yeah.
The monks had maintained these texts from ancient Rome and Greece.
And now El Salvador is becoming that repository of the stuff that's actually knowledge and real, while the rest of the world goes through these fiat proof of stake dark ages. Would you agree with me on that?
Yes. And in the last few moments here,
yes.
I want to say, that proof of stake mindset is a remnant of the Dark Ages. And, you know, it wasn't just like the Dark Ages weren't exited in just a course of a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. Like that mindset is always going to be there. As Bastiat said in that essay, The Law, like it's a permanent state of human kind. Is like we would prefer to we prefer to avoid pain, and to work is pain, and therefore we're going to plunder instead. We would rather just avoid pain, avoid working. So if we could avoid working by taking somebody else's money, right? So that proof of stake mindset is something that is always there, and you see it even with Bitcoiners. Like that is a mindset that's hard to escape. You see it with certain Bitcoiners, well, with all people, like, right? This is a mindset innate to humans, is that you think that by virtue of you being there at, 10 cents or $10 or $1,000, that you somehow deserve something more than the pupusa seller who just started stacking sats. Like that you somehow should have more authority or more say over the system because you were early, or you did that yesterday or last year or the year before, right? But like I said, every 10 minutes, Bitcoin forces you to get up off your ass and work to prove your worth to the system.
Yeah, or even work in filtering out all the garbage in the system by having a more focused view of what's real and what's not real. Every 10 minutes this happens. So yeah, I agree with that. I mean, just because people were early into Bitcoin, very few actually lasted more than a few years before they went down the path of shitcoining. And I can only think of maybe 10 or less that actually have stuck it through this long.
Well, every 10 minutes. So we've had to prove our worth to Bitcoin. How many times? 4 times so far in just this episode of Orange Pill Podcast. Microdosing Tamales de Gallina. We have our tamales. We're gonna.
The banana leaf comes off, right? You don't eat the banana leaf. It's not like a wrapper.
It's nature's way. It's like tinfoil. It's nature's tinfoil.
Oh, okay.
You use that. You have to cook it, but I guess we put it in the oven, right?
We have to figure out how to work the oven.
Yeah. We haven't used the oven yet. Oh boy, we're like metaverse people. We're sitting here mocking people from the metaverse, and we're like, we don't even know how to cook.
We don't know how to use the oven.
Exactly.
Well, why are we
Who
saying?
The fuck are we
what
to
are
talk?
we talking about? We can't work anything.
Don't trust us. Verify for yourself.
That's a good idea.
Okay, well, and the next set we're gonna have a proper, like, Max got this. He got sold a bill of goods, right? This is This is like a metaverse game. Like, yeah, the woman selling this to a gringo was like, yeah, that's a Torgos, and it was obviously not. As soon as we arrived on the set, like, we were mocked for saying that's not a Torgos. Like, it doesn't have the famous tail, right?
I think it's a parakeet.
Yeah. It certainly ain't no Torgos.
I was sold parakeets. Missold a parakeet.
You were sold a pile of parakeets. Okay, well, hasta la vista. See you next week. I think December 28th. It'll be our New Year's special, end of year 2022, beginning of 2023.